Welcome everybody to today's episode of Katie's Corner. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for downloading this podcast. It means so much. And you made it just in time because today you are all in for a treat. We are going to be discussing My Antonia by Willa Cather. Let's get started with our first caller. Hello? Hi Katie, I'm a huge fan of yours, but I have a really quick question for you. What type of genre is My Antonia? That is a great question. Thanks for calling. My Antonia is considered frontier fiction or autobiographical fiction because of the way Jim tells his story of when he met Antonia. Many of you have also been asking a lot about the characters in the novel, so I'm going to be talking about that to clear things up a bit. The main character in My Antonia is Jim Burden, and he's a boy from Nebraska who is coming to Black Hawk to spend time with his grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Burden. The Burden's neighbors are the Shimerda family, and within the Shimerda family there's Antonia, and she is the girl that Jim develops a crush on while staying with his grandparents. Lena Lingard is a friend of both Antonia and Jim's. Otto Fuchs is the Burden's helper around the farm, and Wick Cutter, the man who tries to rape Antonia. Obviously, there are a lot more characters in this, but these are the ones that had a significant part in developing the plotline of the story. Next up, we have Fabio Fernandez with a look at one of the conflicts of the story.
I think the conflict of this story is about love and relationships. When Jim first moves in with his grandparents, he becomes interested in Antonia, the immigrant who doesn't know English. They spend a lot of time together doing various activities like horseback rides and which helps them to become close. But when life takes them down separate paths, being that Jim goes to Harvard to study law and Antonia is caught up working to provide for her family, they end up growing apart.
That's a very interesting way to look at it, and I agree with you. Jim does have a pretty hard time seeing Antonia married when he comes home from being at school all that time, but that's just how life is, and he realizes that at the end of the book. Thank you so much, Fabio, for sharing your opinion with us. Taking a very different approach, we have Wendy Wallaby. I don't think the conflict is so much about love and relationships, but rather about Jim and his longingness to go back to how things used to be. That's something I never thought of before. Thanks for sharing, Wendy. To conclude this podcast, I would just like to speak a little bit about what I thought of the book. It wasn't one of my favorites. I felt that it was boring because of the repetition of storylines. For example, they were constantly talking about winter and how it is getting in the way of life around the farm. The years passed like days in this book. One minute Jim was a little boy thinking that Antonia was all that, and then he was in college wanting to marry Antonia, and then by the end he was done with college and going back to his hometown to see everything. So that didn't really appeal to me. I also couldn't connect very well with the messages of the story. They weren't very modern. I know this book took place a long time ago, but I felt that it could have made more of an impact on me, and I wasn't very pleased with that. Good read though for kids in high school because it has very good imagery in it and nice vocabulary that will get a student learning. So I would recommend it for a school type read, but if you're looking for something more adventurous, don't pick up this book. If you want more from Cather, check out her other books called Oh Pioneers and The Song of the Lark. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Katie's Corner.